At 76, Henry's mornings followed a sacred ritual. Before the world woke up, he would shuffle onto his front porch in his worn-out slippers, wrap his flannel robe tightly around his thin frame, and sip on a mug of steaming green tea. The rising sun painted the sky with delicate streaks of pink and gold, and the scent of dew-kissed roses drifted from the garden his late wife, Eleanor, had lovingly tended for decades. Henry had always believed that this quiet routine was enough to keep him going. He felt that staying out of trouble, avoiding crowds, and sticking to his tea and toast would somehow guarantee a long, peaceful life. But deep down, an ache had started to bloom, an ache that no doctor could diagnose. One crisp morning, as he scrolled on his old, cracked tablet, a headline caught his eye: after 75, 99% of deaths happen for these 5 reasons, how to avoid them and stay healthy. Henry's eyebrows shot up. Curiosity got the better of him, and he clicked. Heart disease, cancer, stroke, infections, and then, the last word jumped at him like a silent scream: loneliness. Loneliness? He reread it twice. His chest tightened as he looked around. The empty rocking chair beside him, the silent garden, the photos on the wall that no longer had voices behind them. Eleanor had been gone for almost 8 years. His daughter, busy with her own children, only visited on holidays. The neighbors were strangers behind closed doors. Henry realized that, without even noticing, loneliness had wrapped itself around him like a heavy cloak. And that, perhaps, was slowly killing him more than any disease ever could. His tea turned cold in his hands as a single tear rolled down his cheek. That morning, Henry understood that he had a choice: wait for the list to claim him or fight back, not just to live longer, but to truly live. He set his mug down and took a shaky breath. For the first time in years, he felt the faint flicker of determination ignite inside him. Henry stood by his kitchen counter, staring at the basket of apples he had picked from the tree in his backyard. They glowed in the morning light, each one a small miracle of bright red and gold. Eleanor had planted that tree decades ago, insisting it would feed them both, for all the sweet years to come. Henry's heart pounded as he placed a gingham cloth over the apples and tied the corners into a neat knot. His hands trembled, not from age alone, but from fear. It had been years since he had knocked on someone's door without a specific reason, and even longer since he had invited himself into someone's life. With a deep breath, he stepped outside. The crisp autumn air brushed against his cheeks, making him feel both vulnerable and strangely alive. He walked across the street to Maria's house. She had moved in after her husband passed away, but they'd only exchanged polite waves. When Henry knocked, he almost turned and fled. But then the door creaked open. Maria appeared, wearing an old cardigan and a surprised smile that quickly softened. "Henry," she exclaimed, her eyes darting to the basket. "What a surprise!" Henry cleared his throat, his voice shaky. I thought you might like some apples. I haven't seen you in a while." Maria's eyes shimmered with tears. She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in, Henry. I was just thinking about making an apple pie. I'd love some company." Inside, her home smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books. They sat at her small wooden table, peeling and slicing apples together. Stories spilled out easily, of Eleanor's laugh, of Maria's old dancing days, of favorite songs and shared aches. Laughter rose and echoed through the house like music long forgotten. As the pie baked, they realized hours had slipped by unnoticed. By the time Henry left with a slice wrapped for later, he felt lighter, as if a hidden weight had finally lifted. That first step turned into many. Soon, morning walks with Maria began, and then neighbors joined. Henry had cracked open a door, and life rushed in like a warm, healing breeze. The morning air was crisp, laced with the smell of fallen leaves and distant fireplaces. Henry and Maria walked side by side, their matching knit hats bobbing as they moved. Their small walking group, once just the two of them, had now grown to include 4 more neighbors, each with their own story, each looking for the same thing: connection. Henry felt younger than he had in years. His steps were lighter, his breath steadier, and his laugh louder. They talked about everything, the sweetness of Maria's homemade jam, the silly antics of neighbor Frank's cat, and memories of dancing under moonlit skies. But as they reached the big maple tree at the end of the block, Henry suddenly slowed down. His vision blurred, and the colors of autumn seemed to swirl together like paint in water. He clutched his chest, feeling an irregular thump in his heart, a foreign, frightening rhythm. Maria's eyes widened. "Henry. Sit down." She guided him gently to a bench beneath the tree, her voice trembling but steady enough to comfort him. The group gathered around, hands on his shoulders, offering water, warmth, and whispered reassurances. When the ambulance arrived, Henry felt a strange sense of peace. As he was lifted inside, he looked at Maria and squeezed her hand with surprising strength. At the hospital, the doctor spoke firmly but kindly. "Henry, if it hadn't been for your active routine and strong social connections, this could have been fatal. Your walking group, your healthy habits, they didn't just add years to your life, they added life to your years." Lying in that sterile room, Henry realized something profound. The list he had read wasn't just about avoiding death. It was about embracing life fully. When Maria visited later that evening, bringing a small jar of her jam, Henry took her hand and whispered, "We saved each other." His eyes welled with tears, but his smile glowed brighter than ever. In that quiet hospital room, surrounded by the warmth of true friendship, Henry finally understood that love and community were the strongest medicines of all. A few months later, Henry found himself standing in front of a small but eager crowd at the local community center. The walls were decorated with colorful banners and hand-painted signs that read, "Choose life, choose connection." Chairs were filled with seniors holding hands, young volunteers taking notes, and families leaning forward, hungry for wisdom. Henry's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the microphone, but when he spotted Maria in the front row, her eyes shining with pride, he felt courage bloom in his chest. "Not long ago," he began, his voice a bit shaky but full of warmth, "I read a list that scared me more than any ghost story. Heart disease, cancer, stroke, infections, and loneliness. I thought I was safe because I stayed quiet, out of trouble. But loneliness was the silent one, the one that almost got me." The room fell silent. Henry paused, letting his words settle deep in every heart. "It wasn't just medicine that saved me," he continued, his voice growing steadier. "It was Maria's apple pie. It was our morning walks, the laughter in the kitchen, the silly jokes we shared under the big maple tree. It was community, movement, love, and purpose that gave me a second chance." A soft murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. Eyes glistened. Some people reached out to hold each other's hands, others wiped tears from their cheeks. "Loneliness is as dangerous as any disease," Henry said, his voice now strong and full of life. "But connection is the real cure. Move your body. Feed your soul. Check on your neighbor. Share your apples. Those small acts. They're everything." When he stepped down, the audience surged forward. Seniors hugged him, young people promised to visit their grandparents more often, and new friendships sparked right there in the room. Maria came up to him last, tears streaming down her face. "You did it, Henry," she whispered. As he hugged her, Henry felt a warmth so deep it seemed to glow from within. He realized that the best way to stay alive wasn't just to avoid death, it was to live so fully that life itself overflowed into others.